The next speakers will tell us how brands can win shopper loyalty amid inflation. Joining us now are Beyea, Senior Advisory Services Manager, and Jeff Foster, Senior Manager, Product Advisory Services from Inmar. Gentlemen, the podium is yours.
Thank you, John. And hey, Jeff.
Hey, thanks, John. Hey, Bill.
Jeff, thanks for joining me for another round of presenting. We've done quite a few of these together over the years. And thank you for everyone who's joined us today. Just a real quick background. Jeff and I work both at Inmar directly with CPG brands in the planning, optimization, targeting, and analytics space. So today we're going to be talking a bit about what's happened with the CPG world over the last few years, and also what's happening with shoppers, and then some ways that you can think about promoting and what you can do when you can't promote. So that being said, let's get started. There's probably some folks that saw the title of this webinar and thought, I've got a bad feeling about this.
Okay, Bill. It's May the 4th, but let's stay on target.
Okay, we'll stay on target. So we're going to start our conversation with a look at inflation, supply chain issues, and the challenges facing today's consumers. I think everybody on here is probably pretty familiar with those, but we need to just at least set the stage. Then we're going to take a look at a couple of points from our 2022 industry insights on manufacturer-funded coupons, and those are coupons that flow through the settlement process. And then in addition, some of our shopper-based studies that we conduct. We run surveys every month and annually to talk to shoppers and consumers and understand what's happening with their shopping behavior and with promotion usage. And then, as I mentioned lastly, and importantly, we want to share some actionable insights on how you can adapt in this environment and try to maintain or gain loyalty.
So, Bill, that said, hey, this is where the fun begins.
It is. So just assessing the situation, again, we want to start off by taking a quick look at the landscape and current situation to set the stage. The last few years, and even now at this moment, and at least the near future, has been filled with economic shifts, supply issues, and all kinds of things that have led to a shift in shopper behavior and promotion usage. So let's take a look. So these things that we've just mentioned have created multiple challenges for many shoppers and for retailers, and especially for brands.
Yeah, and if you look at this, I mean, these are things that we've seen in the headlines, and actually, unfortunately, to be the bearer of bad news, some of these have even changed since we put this deck together. The consumer price index is even higher now. It was reported at 8.5% in March. We talk about some of the rises in food prices. The USDA's Economic Research Service updated and said that it's predicting 4.5% to 5% rise in food prices this year. And we're just continuing to experience these shortages when we enter the grocery store. And it's no longer, just paper products, but you can see it occur through various categories in store. It could be meats, produce, frozen dairy. Those are just some of the examples. So, Bill, these challenges are driving behaviors in shoppers. So let's take a look at that.
Yeah, definitely changing behavior. So what has it done? I mean, when people aren't able to get their favorite things on time or at the right price, they historically and continue to look for deals and coupons. They look for lower priced alternatives, or unfortunately, they may stop buying. I found this quote a couple of weeks back. I thought it was perfect for this from a Wall Street Journal article. Shoppers are buying staples in smaller quantities, switching to cheaper store name brands, and more rigorously hunting for deals. And the shift is especially pronounced among lower income consumers who splurged on household products amid the heights of the pandemic.
So, sorry to start this presentation out on such a fun intro here, but that is the current situation, and so now we want to take a look at how that has impacted the promotion industry, as well as what shoppers have been telling us.
Yeah, so let's start out with some industry trends. and we'll hop right into it. So as mentioned, Jeff and I at Inmar work in the promotion space. We work directly with CPG brands, and we also work on the industry stats and industry trends that are published each year. And so we just talked about some of these a couple of weeks ago, but I just wanted to set the stage first, to kind of explain what's going on with promotions. So we have seen year to year for many years running declines in both redemption and distribution. These charts on this page are showing those at an annual level. So starting with the left chart, industry distribution, it has been declining. In 2020, it declined about 15% versus the prior year, following another double-digit decline. But then in 2021, it slowed down a bit. It declined only about 12%, meaning there were 12% less offers in market that year than the prior year. So a little bit of a slowdown there.
Yeah, and then when you look at redemption volume on the right, for consumer promotions, as Bill said, it's historically been in decline. That's nothing new. With the pandemic, 2020, we saw another double-digit decline. And believe it or not, last year's decline of 21% was not even as big as 2019's. So we don't have it on here, but just for sake of reference, we saw a 28% decline in redemption in 2019 versus 2018. So to see 2021's decline ending up at only 7% versus the prior year, and given all of what we just reviewed about the current situation, this actually isn't that surprising for you and me to see this kind of ease up. And, hang tight, because we've got a lot more to say about the whys behind this coming up.
Sure. So let's continue just looking at promotions or coupons for many people like to still call them. Offer values have increased along with inflation and grocery prices, which is a good thing for shoppers. So we've got some things broken down here by food and non-food, food in blue, non-food in orange. As far as face values, we saw a 3% jump or a little bit of, I wouldn't say that's a jump, but a 3% increase for food and about a 7% increase for non-food. And those were on top of increases that we had seen the prior year. So as the economic conditions have worsened or as inflation has gone up, face values have been trending upwards as well. But it's also important to put those into perspective with the purchase requirements. So purchase requirements have been trending downward a little bit. So net, what that means is that the percent unit discounts have been trending upward, about 5% up last year for food and about 12% up for non-food. And then we've got promotion length in here. We've seen some variations in those, more up for food, down a little bit for non-food. I think a lot of that has to just do with the types of offers being put in market and the different lengths which some of those typically run. But net values have been sort of heading in the right direction if your goal is to be offering, enticing incentives to brands during this time period. So that being said, Jeff, let's take a look at some of what we have found in our shopper studies, which people tend to find really interesting. And again, with those, we talk to shoppers who, on a monthly basis and an annual basis, we're typically talking to people who have just shopped within the last few days or few weeks, and we ask them about their usage of coupons, their in-store behavior, their planning behaviors, and all of that. So, Jeff, let's jump into some of that stuff because I think people usually find this stuff pretty cool.
Yeah, and this is something that, over the last 2 years, every one of us has had to adapt and change some of our behaviors. But there's one thing that hasn't changed. You've heard the saying, there's two sure things in life, death and taxes, right? Well, I'd like to offer a third, in that shoppers are always going to look for deals and discounts. And so over the next few slides, we're going to take a look at a variety of different aspects of what shoppers have talked about, from brand and trial switching, changing views on store brands, being more purposeful in planning and shopping. And then we're hearing from shoppers that their promotion usage has changed, that there's a growth in digital engagement, and that engagement with promotions is not just one specific part of the shopper journey. So we'll get a little bit deeper into that. So to start, I'd like to look at the impact that it's had on brand switching and trial.
Good place to start.
So one of the first things that we want to point out and this was a big jump, and you can see this in the headline, is that 68% of shoppers said they tried new brands on recent trips that were influenced by price, promotions, and media. Well, what's really significant with that is that was up from only 40% of brand trial in 2020.
That's a nice jump. And it's not surprising. The most commonly stated reason by shoppers for why they tried a new brand last year were price and sales. Just going back to what you said, Jeff, your third truth in life there. 34% said this in 2021, which is up from 25% in 2020. And again, it makes sense. When we have rising prices at the grocery store and everywhere else, people are going to start looking for ways to save. There's definitely been times I've been looking for more ways to save and have definitely noticed the price increases at store and often can't find savings on some of that stuff. So two other big drivers of brand trial and switching were coupons and advertising. 21 to 27% of shoppers said that these had an impact on their decision to try something new. And interestingly, the highest driver during the first pandemic year in 2020 was personal recommendation. If you think back, everybody needed recommendations on everything. Like, how do I survive and live life in this new environment, and even how to, what to buy and what products people should be buying. Personal recommendation was huge, but it switched back to where it's typically been historically, which is more about advertising and promotions.
Yeah, all these are pretty significant, but we've seen another significant change in recent years, and one that's really come into play lately, Bill.
Yeah, good old private label. Some people may not say good old because they may be battling with it, but it's amazing to me how this has changed. I mean, when you and I are about the same age, when we were kids, these products were considered subpar. They were low quality alternatives, and we used to refer to them as generic brands. You remember that?
You did. I didn't.
Fine.
Well, these aren't generic anymore. When you look here, the stat here just really jumps off the page. 72% of shoppers said that store brand products are the same quality as name brand products. And that is such a change from years ago.
Right. I mean, I can remember when nobody wanted to admit that they bought no-name brands or store brand. And again, no offense to store brands today. I'm talking about years in the past. But now people feel like they're just as good. And, what's even more shocking is 64% said that name brands don't matter. That's, for the brands listening to this, that's not a good stat to hear. For the store brands, people who maybe work at retailers, that's a good thing. So depending on where you sit, that's a great stat or a horrifying one. And yet, even if shoppers are viewing the quality, now as being the same as store brands, you'd think then, well, if the quality is the same, the price is inching up, or what, it may be the same. 59% still said that store brands were more affordable and priced lower. So they recognize them as perhaps as good quality, but they're still a way to save money. So it's pretty clear that the perception of these has changed. Just as good, but more affordable than store name brands. It's a huge change.
Yeah, they certainly have. And the shoppers also told us, in addition to their views on store brands, that they're becoming even more purposeful in their shopping trip planning. So let's take a look at that.
Yeah. I bring this up a lot in webinars and talks, and sometimes people roll their eyes or laugh at me, but I think it's really important for brands and marketers to always think about the shopping list, which may seem completely obvious and, well, duh, everybody makes a shopping list, but let's talk about it just a little bit. 90% of people are telling us now that they are making shopping lists, which is up from 75% in 2020. And the important part here is that 75% are saying that they use coupons to determine what goes on that list. And 51% are making longer lists than they used to. And so, why is that so important? Well, we've also seen studies and conducted studies that say if you get on the list, there's a pretty high likelihood that you're going to get purchased. When I make a shopping list, I don't put too many things on there that I have no intention of buying. So, if I put pasta sauce on there and I have my favorite brand, I'm going to go buy it. But then if I can't find it, I may be buying something else in the category, at least something else from that another product from that brand, but there's a high likelihood if I put something on the list, I'm going to buy it. So getting on the list is actually really important, and we'll talk more about planning phases and things like that a little bit later.
And just to kind of carry forward with that, if you're on that list now, shoppers are saying that they are continuing to stock up. 67% said they now keep their freezer fully stocked. And we know from the results from the pandemic and economic factors, a lot of people may still be working in a hybrid or work from home environments, that it's important to have a good stockpile on hand. And we learned that while, this was, it was like you're not able to buy things in 2020, the reason why a lot of things got stocked up, a lot of people just don't want to be caught off guard now because we're facing other supply chain issues that are not necessarily like the original ones we had in 2020.
Yeah, the out of stock now are frustrating, but I think the first time around is more scary to people, and it changed a lot of people. And people became aware that at any time, products that in many people's lifetimes were always available, never a problem to go find it, and suddenly they weren't there, and that was new. I mean, in other countries and places, people face this and have been used to things like this. Here, it hasn't been as much of an issue, and so people adapted, and then you add in rising prices on top of that, and now you have a reason for people to start stockpiling, and where they may never have had to in the past. And again, I think you just said it. People don't want to be caught off guard, and they also don't want to spend more than they have to.
So when we start to look at things and all these stats, it really makes sense, especially with that middle one at the bottom row, of 90% of shoppers stocking up on products when they're on sale. It starts at that list. You get on that list, and then 61% are saying that making a list has become more important to them because of the inflation and the pandemic. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like that's going to change anytime soon because we're still facing out of stocks. We're still facing supply issues. Prices are still expected to continue to rise for the foreseeable future. And those are things that, as we're looking forward, and we'll cover this a little bit later about why it's important or how you engage with this loyalty, because it's just it's a time like we haven't had, but there might be a little bit of an indication of what to expect from history, and we'll touch on that a little bit later, Bill.
Yeah. So just to recap here, it's maybe even more critical today for brands to try to get on the list, whether that's through promotions or advertising or some kind of programmatic media or advertising, social media. Again, it's a no-brainer, but shoppers really are leveraging lists even more today than in recent years, and they're purposeful about it. So, so we mentioned coupons on here. So with that said, let's talk a little bit more about coupons, Jeff.
Okay. You mentioned about the majority of shoppers using coupons to determine what's on that list. I'm not really surprised to see the number of people that have started to use digital coupons over how it's risen over the last couple of years. But the usage of paper coupons is really interesting. So this slide here is kind of looking at some 3-year trends. We're looking at 2019, 2020, and 2021. And we asked shoppers, what types of coupons have you used in the last 3 months? And as much as digital has grown, we're still seeing paper being used. So, in 2021, 67% said they used digital, and 64% also said that they used paper. So, I find that really interesting.
Yeah, we get a lot of questions about paper, and the fact is it hasn't gone away. Many predicted it would be gone by now, or dead and gone. It's not. It's changing, and in some cases, certain methods are changing rapidly, and some may be changing in other ways or in the opposite way that you might predict. But we did see a big dip in the usage of paper coupons in 2020, so that jump there from orange to green. But think about it. Paper coupons are predominantly redeemed in store. There may be some retailers that allow you to do some stuff if you're doing online shopping, but in general, you're going to use those in store. And what happened in 2020 when the pandemic hit? Remember, nobody wanted to go into stores, or if you did want to go into a store, you certainly didn't want to stay any longer than you had to. You were trying not to touch anything. You probably didn't really want to hand something to somebody, and there just were people weren't weren't using them. They weren't in the stores. And then you also had a lot of brands who had to, paper products and cleaning products who had these coupons in market. Also, they couldn't be redeemed. So, so we saw that dip. But look, it inched back up in 2021. And what that tells us is that shoppers haven't abandoned paper coupons, where they bind them or how they use them. That's shifting, but overall, shoppers continue to want coupons of all types, whether they're digital or traditional. It's just what's convenient, what makes sense, and we'll dig a little bit more into this. But their reasons for using more coupons isn't surprising, and there's one stat left here. So among those shoppers who used more coupons in 2021, 54% said it was because of financial pressures. Probably a no-brainer, but again, it was either a change in their personal finances or the increased prices they were starting to find at shelf.
That definitely makes sense with everything that we're seeing here about why. But the question we get asked very often is, regardless of which way these trends are moving, where are shoppers getting their coupons? I mean, many would have predicted that the digital world would have been the only popular source at this point because we went through digital transformation. We're still going through that today. But while we're heading in that direction, shoppers are still interested in getting coupons from all different kinds of sources. So let's take a look at that, Bill.
Sure. And I want to set the stage for this chart before you start zeroing in on anything or wondering about any of the heights or non-heights of these bars. This was based on a question we asked shoppers, and it was very specific. We said, if you had to choose one source from which to get coupons, and that would be your only source to get them, what would you choose? So this is not saying where people are getting their coupons. It is saying where they would prefer to if given the option. And so, it was interesting to start on the left. We were linked to my loyalty card. That's, we have a million different names for that, digital, load to card, whatever you want to call it. We call it digital. We saw 16% last year and 16% the year before. Both said that was their favorite source, although we see a lot more than 16% using digital coupons, and we'll show some more about that in a moment. But, that didn't really change. But then we saw some others, some of these sort of techie-ish type sources for coupons, social media or third-party mobile apps. We saw an increase year to year in those. So, either staying the same or increasing in terms of use. And then we pulled a couple of traditional methods here, at home type coupons, FSI, your traditional Sunday coupons. Surprisingly, we saw an increase there in interest. And again, this is just people mentioning their interest, not whether they're actually going out and using them or not, but still shows that there are people who are interested in getting coupons from a source that's been rapidly changing that many people are questioning these days. And then there's a huge drop there in direct mail. That, I think, was inflated the prior year because, again, think back to COVID. People were afraid to go out, touch anything, talk to anyone, or, feeling ourselves up. And so I think a lot of people were saying, hey, I'd prefer to get my coupons just sent to me at home, just send me something in the mail, and then it dropped back down to a normal level. Counter to that, actually looking in some of our industry stats, we've seen direct mail actually, hang on or even increase in usage a little bit. So that one's maybe a little misleading. But then what really gets interesting is when we move to the last three, Jeff.
Yes. A lot of times when we think about paper, we gravitate towards what's in the Sunday newspapers or maybe in direct mail. But these last three are in-store coupons. And it really makes sense that the interest in these would increase from 2020 to 2021. Because as you said, people started to return to regular shopping in store. And that should be good news for brands who need to disrupt or engage at the point of purchase.
Yeah, I talked about this in another presentation just recently. Think about impulse products. If you're a brand that's got an impulse shop or an impulse buy, all those fun things that you see when you're in the store and you can't refuse, you pick them up. You may not be putting them on your list when you're planning, but then once you get to the store, you see them and you need. I always use Twinkies as an example. If occasionally I'll see them, I'm just like, I must have these and take them home, even though I've never put them on my list. But or even products, new items or other things that people may not be aware of. Sometimes you need that in-store, push or visual. You need to have shoppers in store to see these things or to engage in these things. And so It's nice to see that shoppers have not lost interest in the types of in-store promotions that can still disrupt, whether, again, on an impulse buyer getting someone to switch at shelf. And we'll talk a little bit more about even those things a bit later in this presentation. But nice to see that, that interest is coming back as more and more people kind of return to normal in-store shopping.
So the next question is, who's using coupons these days? So, Bill, it must just be older segments who are conditioned to use coupons years ago. I mean, younger shoppers don't care about clipping coupons, do they?
Wrong. So let's take a look at these charts. So in our studies, we also break things out by gender and by demographic and various things. We do age age segmentations, and just look at these charts. It's just about everyone saying that they're using paper and digital coupons.
Impressive.
It is impressive. And I went on a rant recently, so I want to go on that rant again, just for fun here. But let's start to the right with boomers. So again, I mentioned Jeff and I work a lot directly with brands in planning and designing coupon promotions and things like that. And we hear from a lot of brands who are targeting older shoppers that they don't want to run digital because older shoppers aren't digitally engaged, right? They only use FSIs. They only use traditional promotions. They're not doing things on their phone or online or whatever. Well, wrong. Let's take a look. I mean, 54% of boomers told us that they use paper coupons in the last 3 months of 2021. And 50% also said they use digital.
Yeah, that's a much different story than it was in years back. A lot of that was influenced by the pandemic. Many people had ignored online shopping and digital promotions, buying with curbside pickup or delivery, and they were thrust into it. And once they had a chance to experience, they realized what they'd been missing.
Yeah, and that pretty much went for all segments. I mean, we saw a massive increase in digital adoption, whether that's online shopping or even with promotions over the last few years. And usage of both paper and digital coupons across pretty much all ages. What I found really interesting was how high the younger segments were ranked. Millennials, were highest, but look at Gen Z. I mean, the younger group, they're just a little higher than us, now getting older Gen Xers.
Yeah, promotions definitely are generational. I think these findings show that these younger segments have also caused what I'd like to say is a great disturbance in the wallet. Sorry for the pun on that, May the 4th. But anyway, Bill, these stats have been mostly from 2021. So what are we seeing right now in 2022?
Sure. So I mentioned we're running surveys all the time. So here's some from mid-April. We're seeing inflation and price increases, no surprise here, continuing to alter purchase decisions. It's still very much an impact and will continue to be. And based on our current survey, 58% of shoppers told us they are very concerned about inflation, with an additional 25% saying they're moderately concerned. So that's 83% of shoppers who are concerned about inflation, pricing, and savings as we speak.
Yeah, you can see there right in the middle, over half, 54% of shoppers polled this month said that they recently switched from a brand name product to a store brand. So we're seeing that again in 2022, Bill.
Yep, we are. And then an additional 38% of shoppers just told us that they refrained from purchasing a product that they would normally buy on a recent trip. So I mentioned that earlier. Some people are just deciding, hey, I'm just not going to buy it all right now because of prices and things like that. So switching isn't the only threat, but people just dropping off altogether is also a concern. So on that note, we'll take a look at some of the specific behavioral changes that shoppers have just been mentioning to us over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, there's quite a few changes here. With a high number of shoppers who said they were concerned about inflation, we asked them how they changed their shopping behavior. And as Bill mentioned, these results are from April. The most common answers were reducing the number of products purchased and reducing the number of trips.
Yeah. And then here comes some familiar themes once again. 35% saying they're buying more store brands, 27% prioritizing items that are on sale. And then, of course, from where you and I said, Jeff, it's always nice to see any increases in coupon usage. Then we had 26% said they're using more coupons right now.
Hey, Bill.
Yeah.
You still have that DeLorean around? I feel like we need to take a trip back in time because this isn't our first rodeo with challenges like this.
Yes. Get the DeLorean. It's true. This is definitely not our first time. I do have the keys here for the DeLorean. So if my calculations are correct, when this baby hits 88 miles an hour, we're going to see some serious.
Bill. Come on, it's the webinar now.
Just having a little fun. So,
yeah.
Okay. So, flux capacitor seems to have been working. We've traveled back in time, but Jeff, what did you set the date for?
Oh, welcome to 2008, Bill.
Oh, come on. The recession. Nobody would ever choose to come back here, but whatever, Jeff. All right, let's see what happened.
Well, I know one thing that happened. After years of decreases, we saw annual coupon redemption volume increase. And this was a very noticeable shift because it was one that caught many brands off guard.
Yeah, I remember it well. I remember specifically a number of brands I was working with at the time whose budgets were just getting blown left and right. Nobody had anticipated this sudden increase in coupon usage. It had not happened in years. I mean, it was crazy enough that some of you, I know, Jeff, you'll remember, there was a TV show that came out at the time, Extreme Couponing or Extreme Coupons. I can't remember the exact name. But you know life is crazy and something weird is going on when you've got a primetime TV show about coupon clipping.
I actually thought it was pretty cool. But anyway, it was definitely a unique time.
If you had told me, I never would have guessed.
Yeah, it was unique, but, the important thing to point out here is that the landscape was very different then versus now. When we look back at 2008, we didn't have digital coupons the way we did now. There were different types of predominantly paper. 2008, they weren't faced with these out of stocks that there are now. And we didn't have online grocery shopping. A lot of the digital transformation is very different than today. But the point we're trying to make here is that during times of economic crisis, people will look for ways to save, especially on those things that they cannot live without, because consumer confidence is definitely a factor on coupon usage.
Yeah, and let's talk about consumer confidence just a little bit. So there's a consumer confidence index, some of you may be familiar with, and we looked at that in relation to the coupon increases we saw. So if you start from the left there, that index is right around 100, it's a little above 100, around 2006, 7, and then you see it start to drop down, and then it really plummets between 2008 and 2009. And that yellow box shows the point in time where we mentioned before just that coupon redemption volumes started to increase and turn around. And then you can see over time the confidence level inched its way back up, and we got to a high point, and then look what happened in 2020. It dropped off. You can all guess why and when that was. Beginning of the year, COVID, and consumer confidence suddenly just dropped off. Not as much as we'd seen in the past, but it did drop. And coinciding with that, we saw right at the beginning there, we saw a spike in coupon usage, especially digital. We saw a spike in digital, not paper, but digital coupon usage for a short period of time there, and then things have trickled back up. So, I wouldn't use this to say, well, we need to hit, 60, an index of 60, and then coupons are going to start going crazy or anything like that. I think it's just more to help indicate that when the economy shifts, when consumer confidence goes down, we typically see coupon usage go up. So, it's not an exact science, but if things get worse on this index as we move forward, we could see that, we might start seeing some trends kind of like what we've seen in the past. And we've got another trend, Jeff. We talked a little bit more about how they were perceived a little differently back then, but were store brands a threat even back then?
Yeah, it's really interesting when you look at the unit share of store brands that occurred, and we look at a time period of like January 2005 to October of 2010. And this line here is kind of representing how that increased. And you see during the times of economic growth at that time, store brands, and as Bill said, maybe at that back then it wasn't as much perceived as the same quality as it is today. But once a recession hit, that's where behavior started to change. That's where we started to see people turning anywhere they could to find savings. And what's really telling now is that last month when we asked people, what are your perceptions of store brands? 72% of shoppers in 2022 feel that store brands are as good as branded products.
Yep. So this threat that we saw in the past to brands is probably going to continue to be even more pronounced today. So, all right, I can't stand being back in the recession any longer. It gives me like nervous tics and things. So can we go back to 2022 now? Is that all right?
Sure.
All right. So we're back. The flux capacitor worked. So in the remaining time that we have today, let's think about everything we've just said and give brands some things to think about in terms of using promotions to maintain loyalty, and even a few things to think about when promoting isn't an option. Obviously, every brand is different. Promotion types are different. Situations are different. So we can't really get into specifics that's going to be a one-size-fit-all. So some of these are kind of high-level things to think about. But, running promotions right now can be pretty tricky for some brands. So we just want to give some ways to navigate and think about that. So let's jump in, Jeff.
Sure. This is really about being agile and adapting with changing shopper needs. The first things brands really need to do is think about that, about how they're going to be agile. Are they willing to adapt with where the shopper is today? For example, has your target shopper changed? I mean, you may have had it all figured out, but who your target shopper was and what they look like and all the attributes and their needs, but have they changed now? I mean, we've spent a good majority of this webinar talking about all the influences and the factors that are changing shopper behaviors. We've just scratched the surface on some of the many ways that shoppers have changed over the last few years, and they're still changing today. If we think about shopper segments, that you used to go after, is it relevant today? Or maybe have they decided to buy a cheaper product, or are they no longer buying in your category? Or do you need to reevaluate and find a new way to define a segment? And if so, do you need to change your approach in promotions?
That's a really good point, Jeff. You may very well have to change the approach. But, I mean, even if your target shopper hasn't changed, are you aware of how much they are affected by inflation? It may not be, it's not the same for everybody. If your product appeals to a more affluent audience, you may not have to worry quite as much. There were a lot of high-income shoppers who weren't out of work during the pandemic, but like everyone else, they were staying home. And they weren't spending as they normally might, and so there were many who were able to save and build up their resources, their bank accounts, and things like that. And so they may still be kind of comfortable right now, or at least more so than other folks, and they may be able to tolerate increased prices. I know there were a lot of brands last year and going into this year hoping that when they raise their prices, their shoppers will be able to tolerate it and remain brand loyal because it's not going to be a problem for them. And for some shoppers, it may not be a problem. But if you need to promote to these folks, you may not need to give as much of a rich discount, and or maybe you don't need to promote at all. But what if you may not be losing people? But what if your product appeals to the entire shopper audience, or what if it's most popular among low-income shoppers? We saw that stat earlier that article, quote from the Wall Street Journal about low-income shoppers getting hit hard. And, these folks are likely to be struggling more with increased prices right now. They may not have been able to save much during the pandemic. There were a lot of people out of work during the pandemic who did not build up their bank accounts and their resources and are trying to rebuild right now if possible. And if that's your key shopper segment, promotions may be absolutely critical to maintain their loyalty right now in the current climate.
Yeah, the finally is, that started to hint a moment ago. You may need to change your approach. We see this and hear this all the time. It's important to meet your shoppers where they actually are, not where you think they should be. If we think about those demographics just a few slides back, if you're going to go after an older segment, you might have always depended to reach them with traditional paper coupons. But in today's landscape, you really have to be more agile. And you need to also integrate and reach them with digital coupons as well, or you think you can just depend on one method to reach everyone. I think we've seen here, as much as people are hybrid and going in-store or online to buy, it's the same way with coupon usage. Everybody's using different types of coupons, and it's not predominantly just one way and not the other. So, we'll talk about shopper phases in a minute, but before we go there, Bill, I think it's important to illustrate that, coupons can be used for much more than just subsidization.
Yeah, they certainly can. And I'll give some examples here of what shoppers are saying about coupons changing their behavior. And first, I want to point out that of shoppers who used coupons, the coupons changed behavior of 67% of those shoppers. And so if we're going to use promotions to protect or impact our loyalty, we need to understand what kind of behavior we can impact. So we'll start with the charts. First one's nice to see. I bought an alternate product within the brand. So you can get people to try other things in your portfolio. Let's say you have a product that you're having some supply issues, but you have other products that maybe you can convince a shopper to switch to or sub out. You can get people to switch to something in your same product line. More than a quarter of shoppers, are telling us that. And that's a huge jump from just a couple of years ago if you look at the chart. Then the middle one, of course, is nice to see. I bought a particular item for the first time. So trial. We've got more than a quarter of shoppers telling us that they were trying things as a result of a coupon, versus just buying what they wanted to buy already and just getting a cheaper price on it. One I find really interesting and important is the third chart there, which is I switched back to a brand that I had purchased previously. So think about the problem that many of us are facing right now with loyalty and losing people. Almost a quarter of shoppers of coupon users said that helped them switch back to something they had bought previously. So maybe something they had switched away from or had stopped thinking about for a while. So that may be critical, and that's going to be useful for a lot of brands moving forward. And then a few others. 35% bought more than they usually would. So that's another good thing. If you can get people, the more you can get people to pantry load or stock up, the longer they have your product before they might switch to something else. 1 out of 4 purchased sooner than they had anticipated, and 29% bought a particular brand that they otherwise would have not purchased. So quite a bit of behavioral changes. Some people just assume that almost all redemption on coupons is just subsidization, but it really isn't. And this is across all coupon types. If you focus in on certain ones that are a bit more targetable, you can get numbers that are a lot higher than these. But this is across the broad spectrum of all promotions.
All right, Bill, you and I both know that of all the webinar content that we produce, the thought leadership that's written, this has to be the most popular question, the most sought after insight that we publish. And you guys have heard it on the webinar so far. We've talked about digital transformation. Bill and I have both been in this industry for 20 plus years. And we've seen it all. Unfortunately, we did live through that recession and all the fun changes we had back in 2008. But there's a couple of views here I really want to call out. That if you have any doubts about digital transformation, I hope by the time I finish explaining this, you'll be convinced. The line chart here. So we look at the share of industry redemption volume comparing the freestanding inserts and Sunday newspapers in orange, and the teal line that's representative of digital. And this is going just back to 2018. And you can see at that time that there was a pretty wide gap that existed between FSI and digital. And as we start to move to the right, we start to see that gap narrowing. And this was going to happen eventually, where they would have a convergence and digital would overtake the FSI. The pandemic really kind of probably accelerated something that would have happened, in a year or two later. but it accelerated in 2020. You can kind of see that crossing point. And then it's almost like the inverse is starting to occur, where that separation begins, where digital really starts to take the share. FSI still exists and it's there, but predominantly the redemptions we're seeing are coming from digital. And just to highlight that even further, to the right, you'll see a couple of charts. The top chart is the annual digital redemption in millions, and you can see that has gone up pretty significantly in 2021 from 2020, while FSI continue to decline year over year. And, this is a great way to just, really illustrate the need to adapt. If you have always relied on paper, the time's now, folks. You can't continue to just use one traditional method to reach your shoppers. They're changing. And, this is where digital really makes the most sense about offering promotions in turbulent times, and we'll speak a little bit about that in a moment.
I have a quick question that came in, Bill and Jeff. How are you counting the redemption of digital coupons? Is that downloads or actual redemption?
That
is actual redemptions.
Yeah, downloads we count as activations, and that goes into the distribution numbers. This is actual used coupons redeemed at retail.
Another question: are brands still concerned about coupon stacking?
Yeah, I think they always are. I mean, there's different types of controls with that now. I mean, if you've got if you're talking about stacking multiple coupons, most retailers try to prevent that, and especially if you've got a digital or a paper coupon. Stacking with trade is always, can be a concern, and that's something that still exists, but it depends. It varies.
Yeah, I don't think that there's any issues today where somebody's going in with a paper coupon and a digital coupon and trying to buy one item. Stacking really is if they go into a store and something's on BOGO and you happen to have a coupon, whether it be digital or paper, those scenarios absolutely can be stacked. But, nothing where, there's like a duplication of an offer being used on a single purchase.
Okay.
All right, so we've got 3 slides left, and we're almost at time here, so we'll go quick. So last thing, just engaging along the shopper journey is an important thing to think about. So we usually think about 3: pre-shop, in-store, and post-shop, and all these phases are important and create opportunities to reach a target shopper, at the right time and based on your goals or objectives. Let's talk about these briefly, Jeff.
Yeah, just to keep it kind of brief here, we've talked about that shopping list. We've talked about that influence of coupons that really, have an impact on what makes it on that list. And predominantly, we're reaching shoppers as marketers before they enter the store. So as Bill said, it's been so important to get on that list, to be there as an influence. But then, Bill, let's think about the in-store, because the in-store, to me, is really that phase of disruption. Because now that they've made that list, then we got to change their minds, right?
Yeah. The in-store phase is always interesting to me too. I mean, it really is the disruption phase. And as I mentioned before, the impulse products and all of that. But 36% of shoppers are downloading or using the store's mobile app while they're in store. Another 34% said they're visiting the retailer website while they're in store. So that means they're looking for deals. They're trying to find the right price. I saw in the chat log here, there's a question from somebody about having any info on coupons influencing a purchase but not actually being used. That's really hard to track, but there's an interesting stat that happens to be here. The last one, 23% of shoppers who clipped but did not redeem a coupon did so because they found a better coupon or deal in store. So they may have found something else at the point of sale that disrupted. That's part of that. And then lastly, there's post-shop, which is usually about retention of shopper or staying engaged with a shopper before their next trip. We talk a lot about digital and FSIs and other methods, but also, post-purchase promotions like rebates and electronic checkout coupons are really popular with shoppers as well.
Yep. In the essence of time, I want to be just really brief on the next slide here, Bill, about actionable steps on what you can do to promote. We've talked a lot about out of stocks. We've talked a lot about these challenges that we have. But in evaluating, can you run a promotional campaign is actually the first actionable step you can take. Because you want to make sure that, if you are putting a promotion out there, that, shoppers can redeem that. And that might cause you to rethink about how maybe you go to market. It might be running more retailer-specific offers or having that ability. We talked about agility and adaptability, being able to turn an offer on or off very quickly. And that's, again, one of these advantages with digital is that I don't have to rely on a printed piece of paper, that I can adjust a lot faster. Determining the relevance of your offer and thinking about, your net unit costs. We talked about price increases. We also have to think about, what types of discounts. So I know historically we work with brands and we talk to brands that a lot of times there's a lot of rinse and repeat. This is the value that we've always run. We want to continue to run in a certain value. And you really need to take a moment to reevaluate that. What price do you want the shopper coming out of store? And then also thinking about your purchase requirements, because as we said, people are stocking up more. But, there is a point that each one of us has as shoppers where no matter how much we love a product, we're only going to buy so much of it. We're not going to buy an indefinite amount. And so, finding that sweet spot, and then also, thinking about, store brands and that impact. How close do you want to narrow that gap in the prices if you're a name brand? And, again, just kind of reinforce, if I'm going to market today, you lead with digital, you supplement with your paper, especially with your in-store. But those are really the key things to take into consideration, being nimble and being agile. So Bill, you want to talk about when it's not an option to promote?
Yeah, I'll do that real quick. But one thing that just popped into my head too, about digital too, is think about if you're a brand who's had to raise your prices and you just can't really go out and discount right now because you need your prices to go up, not down. But it's critical not to lose, some loyals. You can, with digital, you can go in and target those folks. You can find people who have historically always purchased and have dropped off, and only offer promotions to them and not offer them to the general public who may still be buying at a higher price. So just another reason, to think about more targeted type offers, digital or electronic checkout and those types of things. So what about when you can't run a promotion? I mean, so you just outlined some things, what can brands do? And again, this gets a little outside of our normal space, but some things to think about. Try to stay engaged. First, what's important. Understand what's important to your shopper and your segment, and communicate with them. I mean, today's shoppers are so savvy, and there's a lot of factors that are important to them beyond price and taste or quality or things like that. They care about chemicals and ingredients, what they're putting or in or on their bodies. Sustainability, environmental and social policies, and things like that. If you can't offer a discount, maybe you push your message and your position on these topics if that's important to your shopper. Cheaper alternatives and private label may be very appealing, but they may not have those other factors or things, those other things that are valuable. And so if you remind people of those things, they may be less inclined to switch. They may say, remind them why they were loyal to you and liked you in the first place. Maybe a no-brainer, but if you can't give any kind of a discount, and you can at least try to remind people, like, this is why you buy us, this is what makes us different. Maybe you can prevent some of that switching. Shoppers and I guess people in general appreciate honesty and transparency. And as much as we'd like to think that the general public understands the supply chain issues and price increases that we all understand, some of them really just don't understand, the root or what's going on behind that. So if you're having to raise your prices, you could consider communicating that to your shoppers. Tell them why. Help them understand that you're not just, and I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, just making it, but you're not a greedy company. You're not just raising prices like everyone else because you need to. make them understand you need to do this to stay profitable, and that you understand that this is difficult for them, and that it hopefully won't last forever. And remind them that we're all in this together. Everything's, we're all trying to stay afloat. For some shoppers, that may be enough to help them understand and prevent them from switching. They may want to hold on for a bit. And then finally, remember, you can stay engaged and communicate. Things like programmatic advertising, you don't have to have a discount attached to that, or, figuring out, how to engage on social media and gaming, new usage ideas and recipes. Some of these you're already doing, but, the point is staying top of mind. Even if you've lost their purchase, it doesn't mean you have to lose their interest. You can stay top of mind for now and then promote later when it becomes feasible. So even if someone has switched due to price or they can't find you, it doesn't mean that they no longer love your brand. It just means that they've switched, and you can, stay in touch, keep them in love with your brand, and then as soon as you can promote later and try to win them back. So, some of these are pretty obvious, but the point being is you don't have to give up on people that you've lost. And there's some ways that you can continue to communicate and be honest with them about what's going on right now and why, and keep them engaged, keep them interested, and then try to win them back later when you have the opportunity to do so.
Wow. We just covered a whole lot, didn't we? And there's just so much more on these subjects that we didn't even touch on. But, we want to let you know, we regularly post thought leadership articles and content through our thought leadership page on Inmar.com. And, we'd be honored if you'd join us there to continue that conversation. You can dialogue with us. You may also notice just from seeing the graphic on this page that we've got our 2022 promotion industry analysis coming soon, like really soon, like end of May soon. So, that will also be something that is going to be out, that dives a lot deeper into stats around coupon usage, and some questions have come up in terms of like distributions and redemptions and metrics. We got it all right there. So, again, we want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule today. And if we have any time for questions, we'll be happy to take a minute or so to answer those. And John, we really appreciate the opportunity to present here today.
Okay, well, thank you both. That was really very interesting. One quick question here, as time allows. I read that the Extreme Couponing TV show is coming back. Is that a good thing for coupons?
I had not heard that. That's very interesting. Well, we'll have to see. It depends on how they present it and what they're telling us. A big piece of what was going on back in the recession, the phrase double coupons and double couponing was a much bigger thing than it was. And if anybody isn't familiar with that's a lot of retailers offered, if you brought in a coupon that was 50 cents off one, they'd double that. The retailer would pay an additional 50 cents on that so that the value to the shopper was $1. And then somebody had asked about stacking, right? So if you think about that, if you've got a retailer and let's say you've got a coupon for 50 cents and the retailer automatically doubles it to $1, but then there's a trade deal going on where, it's a BOGO or there's something else. And you had a lot of people figuring out ways to get products for free or next to nothing, or sometimes even, get the incentive ended up being more than the price of the product. And some retailers were even offering money back or discount credit on other things. That's a little harder to do today. Those doubling policies are not really widespread anymore. There's still some of it out there, but it's not the way it was. And then also, with digital and things like that, it's changed. So it'll be very different now.
Bill?
Whatever it'll be, but I'm certainly curious to see what they do.
Yeah. Bill, I'd like to also just kind of say, in regards to that, it could have a positive effect in terms of at least just promoting and reminding people that promotions are there. We still have represent a large number there in terms of the volume and millions redeemed. But I think one opportunity, that both, brands and retailers, should look at with this is that, having, the controls and, being able to, navigate those waters, because we know inevitably it's been that way. We didn't have anything in here, but if you think about fraud mitigation, and how do you address that? And, having good settlement partners to be a trusted intermediary for, handling it. Because, honestly, coupons, once they're redeemed, we all know this, it's money. And it's that whole transfer and that processing and payment and validation, having this good control. So, I'm not actually surprised that you said that that's being considered, because people are always looking to find what worked in the past and bring that up again. So we'll see, but it's a crazy industry that we're in for sure.
Absolutely. As it happens, the current issue of CPG Matters, available at cpgmatters.com, has a story about the extreme couponing TV show coming back. So anybody can read it, cpgmatters.com. So Bill and Jeff, thank you so much. That was really, really very interesting. A lot of information, but it was all very topical and interesting. And if anybody wants to continue the dialogue with Bill and Jeff, you can contact them at bill.beyea@inmar.com or jeff.forster@inmar.com. Thank you both very much. That was excellent.
Thank you, and may the force be with you.
Have a great day, everybody.